Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the Senstennial Podcast. We got the whole crew back together for this one, and we're excited to talk about how the Sens have been doing recently. And we're going to start off talking about our trade deadline acquisitions. And as everyone knows, Ottawa made a huge move sending out core player Josh Norris to the Buffalo Sabres with Jacob Bernard Docker alongside him, and in return got centerman who had been underperforming for the last couple seasons, Dylan Cozens, and a depth defenseman and Gilbert, for those who are dying to know, and a second round pick. And we're going to talk about the impact of a guy like Cousins on the lineup and also talk about the other trade the Sens made at the deadline, which was to acquire Fabian Zetterlund from the San Jose Sharks and how they're fitting into the team right now. So I'll flip it over to Matt first. And Matt, how have you felt about the acquisitions of Dylan Cozens and Fabian Zetterlund since joining the Sens?
I got to put it out there first. I feel like the last 10 you've always flipped it to Bennett, so I feel pretty honored to be flipped to on the first one here. So I will live up to expectations because Bennett always brings the heat, and I'm excited to start this one off. First, I'm going to start with Fabian Zetterlund because I think there's unfortunately a little less to talk about. Um, the guy's really only played on the fourth line, and then finally got an opportunity on the first line after a pretty abysmal Colorado Avalanche game. That the Sens looked really flat, and I think Coach Green recognized that you needed to change some things up, and he played with Stutzla and Brady, and I really saw the reason for that. I thought he brings energy. He's a very fast player. He's got such a heavy shot. And when he gets to take it, I mean, he's scored 24 goals last year and he has 17 goals this year. The points haven't come yet, but I'm not too worried about that because he's a really solid player. And I love the acquisition because it was a guy that Steos really wanted. And Steos, went and pestered Mike Greer to the point he was like, fine, just take him. Like give me something that makes it okay and just leave me alone. And I think that's hilarious. And I love the tenacity there because I think Fabian Zetterlund becomes a piece of the core moving forward. And then on to the big creme de la creme type deal. Dylan Cozens for Josh Norris. And, we talked about it when it happened. And I spoke to the fact that I felt like Dylan Cozens was a better play driver than Josh Norris was. And I don't know about you guys, but I've seen that in spades. He has 7 points in 8 games, 4 assists, and most of them primary. And he's also scored a couple snipes with 3 goals in those 8 games. But the biggest noticeable thing I've seen was that he's reinvigorated Drake Batherson's game again.
Mhm.
And just being able to see a center that can actually drive play and move the puck up and not feel like it needed to be determined by the winger is nice because I feel like when too much pressure is put on Batherson to move the puck around, he wilts after a couple of games. But now that you have that play driving center who has tenacity and who hits so much, he had in his first 3 games, he had almost 20 hits, which is just insane behavior. And I love that for our new second line center. So really happy we have him, and he's been a great addition so far.
And don't forget Dennis Gilbert, dude.
Yeah,
Coming
I
in.
I mean, come on though. Like he played 1 game. He was fine. He looked like an upgrade on Travis Hamonic, but is the bar really that high?
Hey, Travis Hammonick's been one of the biggest point getting defensemen in the past week.
It is incredible. I will give you that, Matt. You are correct.
And Bennett, I'll flip it over to you. Going second today, which I guess is a big deal. So, what have your thoughts
It's a
been?
big deal to me, Matt. I've
So,
been
what have your
keeping
thoughts?
tally.
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes Bennett just has that look. If I don't throw it over to him, he might come after me. So,
He's got that
um,
dog in him. I get it.
yeah.
That's right.
And who else has got that dog in him but the guy we just talked about? And how about that segue? Dylan
Yeah, I mean,
Cozens.
Dylan Cousins definitely does have that dog in him. I think Sens fans have seen that over the last couple of weeks. He has really reinvigorated the Senators' top six. He provides a very different kind of presence to what Josh Norris did. And, uh, feel bad for Norris. He got shipped to a franchise like Buffalo, and he's missed games there already. I think most people who had a realistic outlook on Josh Norris could have predicted this being the outcome. And the Senators are right now clearly in the win column for this trade. Cousins has an ability to drive play that Norris has rarely shown. He's been scoring goals. He has been doing all of the off the score sheet things correctly. And I think that he's looked really dangerous, and he's just really been a positive presence, like you said, for Matheson. Also, David Perron, who after being invisible for so much of the season, again, I know he missed time too, but he went from being invisible all year to finally finding a little bit of form too, and I think that is also in no small part to Dylan Cousins. Zetterlund, like you say, I'd like to see him get more of a crack up there in the top line. I think that he could be a complement to Timmy and Brady. And, you can use someone like Giroux to provide some down the lineup kind of like pressure, which is also good. And yeah, I think all of it has been some very tidy business from Steve Staios. The team looks better than it did before the deadline, and I can't remember the last time that we were able to say that about the Sens heading into the final stretch this year, and I think it augurs well for the team's chances to, break that playoff slump.
Wow, we've got Bennett using a word like auger. We've made it, boys. We're truly in the driver's
Digging
seat of
uh,
post
digging
trade
into the
deadline.
thesaurus for that one.
Love it. And no, I have to agree with you guys. I think everyone's going to look at Fabian Zetterlund and say, before the trade, he had more points than Dylan Cozens did, more points than Josh Norris did, obviously, and he played more games than both of those guys, but he was contributing in a top six role for San Jose. Coming to Ottawa and playing in a fourth line role, he hasn't really gotten the same opportunities. He has gotten some power play time, and there's been a couple of chances that I've liked from him that could have gone in honestly on other goalies, or you know you try that play and maybe 5 out of 10 times you get a goal, some of those, but he's got a nice shot. I don't ever see him making any egregious mistakes on defense either, which is really nice. Like he's been carrying his weight in that regard more than Highmore or Gaudette have been in the most recent stretch of games for the Sens. So that's definitely a nice sign. You'd like to see the line overall playing better, but I think that he's not a detriment to our depth, which is great. And then Cousins, like, what more can you say? He's been playing great. Um, I don't really have much to add. You guys kind of covered everything, so it's been great. And I think the Sens record has reflected that, right? Aside from, a choke against Montreal in the third period to cough up the lead and just, I don't know, implode, I guess. And then a game against a really tough Colorado squad. The Sens are still 7-2-1 in their last 10. So a nice win on the weekend against New Jersey. They're coming up with a game against Buffalo, and hopefully they can break the trend they've had this season against Buffalo and find themselves in the win column and get over that 80-point threshold as we head into the final, nearly, well, I guess just over 10 games remaining in the season for the Senators. So yeah, I guess on that note, what have you guys thought about this March surge for the Ottawa Senators? And this time I'll throw it to Bennett first.
Yeah, it's been again really positive to see the Sens winning game at a winning games at a time when things have tended to fall apart for them in recent seasons. The team has also just been very streaky this season. Since about November, it's been a story of, big w losing streaks followed by big win streaks. And, there's been sort of like we had that stretch at the start of December, well, through most of the month of December, where the Sens were winning a lot of games. And then, a stretch in January to early Feb when things were looking really good. And then we had a couple losses after the Four Nations and then strung together another five or six in a row. So it's been kind of weird like that all season. But hey, I mean, you want the Sens to be winning more games now than they were before because it shows that things are starting to click, and that's the energy that you want heading into the postseason, if that is the team's fate this year. And yeah, I think you're seeing the team showing an ability to close out games when they're in a winning position, and that's something that the team has struggled with in years past. I think it shows a extra layer of maturity to their game, probably helped in no small part by Travis Green. I think he's a little bit more of a details coach than someone like DJ was, and I think that you're seeing that in the players' ability to kind of like hold on to a lead despite pressure from the opposition. And I think that's been the biggest thing that I've noticed down the stretch here.
How about you, Nate? What have you liked about this March for the Senators?
Yeah, I think there's things that I've really liked, and then there's obviously things I didn't like. I would say I liked their game against most of the opponents, specifically like Toronto and Boston. I really thought they outplayed them quite handily. Um, but it's hard not to look at the games against um, Detroit, Philadelphia, and Montreal were those three big ones. Well, I mean, the Colorado game was we lost.
We won't talk about that one.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about it. But I felt like those ones were we scraped out like a good win because we played very badly in those games. Um, Montreal should have been a win, or at the very least get it to overtime. Um, and some of the things the Montreal game I didn't like because of I didn't love Ullmark's game, and then the Detroit Philly games I didn't like the Sens games. So there's a bit of a dichotomy there with you're getting a Jekyll and a Hyde in both scenarios, but the Detroit game obviously like Ullmark was the reason we won that game through and through, and then he got a deserved night off. And then the game against Philly, like I felt like Forsberg played really well and was able to kind of secure us the W. And then Montreal, I just didn't like much of anything I saw from Ullmark. And like the Sens are still winning games though. They won 6 in a row, and against some teams that have been our like kryptonite. Like Chicago, we barely ever beat Chicago. And we beat them 4-3, which was great. Which was very nice. And then you got a couple like the New York game and the Washington game were both massive comeback games. Washington, we obviously lost in overtime. And then against the Rangers, we won in overtime. So there's a lot of like really meaningful wins or meaningful comebacks in there. And I felt like them beating New Jersey last game was huge because they're streaky, as we know. I was expecting maybe a 3-game losing streak going into Buffalo, but that wasn't the case. And they held on. But again, it just feels like, I mean, let's be real here. Like Jensen has been out for the past few games, and having Hamonic in the lineup is noticeable. And that's not a good thing. Despite having 2 points in the Montreal game, he still was very bad. And against Colorado, he was even worse. And that's just the mark of like, if you look like a beer league defender, you odds are you shouldn't be in the league anymore. But other than that, I mean, I think I'm being a little more critical because there are things the Sens need to work on, but they're still winning games. And winning is all that matters right now. You're 4 points up on the next closest wild card position. And even having those two games, those two wins above anybody else is huge. And yeah, we'll talk about playoff odds soon, but yeah, it feels good when you have a winning record.
Yeah, so I wanted to rewind and go back to the Ullmark situation because you mentioned, ups, downs. So I kind of want to start there for the next little segment here. I think that there's no question that Ullmark has made a huge difference for the Sens this year. The fact that he has over a 900 save percentage in the games, he's played for the team is pretty monumental considering what Ottawa has had save percentage wise over the past few years. So I think that alone has been great. However, it seems like he has these, mountain peaks where he's playing on another level that no other goalie aside from maybe Hellebuck plays at, this season anyway. And the game against Detroit was an example of that where I was at that game and yeah, it was stressful, but I didn't feel like it didn't feel like, oh man, they're gonna blow us up. With the way Allmark was playing, I'm like, he's locked in. As long as Allmark's playing like that, the Sens aren't gonna lose. And sure enough, they come out of there with an undeserved win, but hey, we'll take it. And but then you have the performances like the one against Montreal where, he had allowed 2 goals through 2 periods, and then in the third period, just I don't know what happened, but he just got lit up. And it's not entirely his fault. It's obviously a team game. But when he has performances like that, obviously he got pulled in the Colorado game after allowing 4 in the first period. It's hard, right? And then he comes back and he has a good game in New Jersey. So it's like, what what is the Linus Ullmark that you're gonna get, especially once you enter the postseason, which knock on wood, but the Senators are on track to break a certain drought. So yeah, I mean, let's just start there. I'll end my tangent and I'll maybe go to you and then we'll flip it to Bennett for Bennett's takes.
For sure. I mean, looking at his game log, the last 10, he's had 5 games above 900 and then 5 games below 900. And luckily, some of those games below 900, he still got the win. But I think obviously there were games like the Boston game and the Montreal game where I haven't felt like I had the most confidence in him, and including the Chicago game as well. But I think he's the type of goalie that needs to get shots early to get in a rhythm. And one of the biggest things I've really noticed lately was his rebound control has not been great. And that has been the catalyst. That was essentially what cost Ottawa the game against Montreal. Um, Being able to find those rebounds when they're in tight is super important, especially when you have guys like Hamonic, Clevin, and Matt and Paolo on the ice. They're not clearing the puck out quite like they should be. And honestly, like I'll say the same thing about like Thomas Chabot. I feel like they need to be a little stronger on their stick in tight, but at the same time, like Allmark is an NHL goalie and he's one of the best NHL goalies in the league, but he needs to be able to find his rebounds. And rebound control is a very tough skill to have. And I find he was very good at it at the start of the season, or in that middle period when he was really cooking. But now it's been a bit tough, and I haven't loved it, and I haven't felt like I have the most confidence in his game. But that may also have a correlation to that when Nick Jensen went out of the lineup and Travis Hamonic went in. So there's something to be said there when the guy that was a healthy scratch is immediately being propped up into your top four. But, I digress.
Bennett, how have you felt about Ullmark lately?
Yeah, I think Naif described perfectly where we're at with Ullmark. I mean, 5 games above, 5 games below 900 in the last 10 games. He's at 908 on the season. That sounds about exactly where it's expect him to be based on the eye test. He has looked shaky at times, and I don't know whether that is because he's still settling into a new team or because our defense tends to be shaky and has been the personnel have been kind of like all over the place with all of the various injuries and knocks the guy's been picking up. So it could be that. It could be that he's just having some teething pains with settling into the new team. He has looked really good in some stretches and he has looked very sus in other stretches, and sometimes it can be game to game. I mean, still think he's a major reason why the Senators are in the playoff conversation right now. Although we have to give some credit to someone like Marilyn as well, who came in, lit it up for like a month in Ullmark's absence, and then went back down to the AHL. I mean, I think he really kept the wheels on the bus there for the month of December. And yeah, I mean, it's very clear that Ullmark is going to be the goalie that the team takes into the playoffs. This is not a tandem situation. I mean, like we have seen, like unless if it's a back-to-back, Ullmark starts. Regardless of whether he had a good game or a bad game, this is not a hot hand. This is not a 1A, 1B. Like Ullmark is our starting goalie, and the behavior of the coaching staff has made that very clear. And I think that's a good thing. I think, teams tend to not run tandems in the playoffs. They might use it to get them through the 82 games prior to that, but it's rare to see teams try and ice two goalies in the same series, and it's rare to see it work if they do try it. So I think that we all need to accept and expect that Allmark is going to be starting basically every game this postseason. And I do still think that gives the Sens the best chance to win. But there are some legitimate question marks about his consistency this year. But the good news is that all that gets wiped away after game 82. And, after that, we'll see, right?
And I
Yeah, and I think
actually,
that. Oh, go
if I
ahead, man.
can, if I can jump in, and I think you brought up a really good point. Um, Out of the last 10 games, Allmark started 9 of them.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's really important to note, like I would have given Forsberg the Montreal game. And I was dead set on that. I said this should be Forsberg's game. He has a good record against them. And, Allmark playing 9 out of 10 games, like that's not sustainable. Um, but that's just me. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I think like personally speaking, I would say like out of 10 games, your starter starts 7 and your backup starts 3 personally, but I'm not a NHL head coach. So, yeah.
What? Why do we have you on the podcast?
Honestly, yeah, I get it. I'll this is my official resignation.
Oh, damn. You hate to see it. Well, speaking of resignations, let's talk about Brady Tkachuk's hip.
Dude, that
Segue.
was good. That was really good. Well done.
So yeah, it appeared from local, super trustworthy, always seems to be in the loop, even despite ownership changes. Garriock mentioned that Tkachuk had been dealing with a hip ailment. So it seems like it's not bad enough that's keeping him out of the lineup, but probably something that my hunch has been dealing with since the Four Nations. But he's just been kind of playing through it as hockey players tend to do. And yeah, I guess flip it over to Bennett first. And Does that something like that worry you as the Sens, are nearing the end of the season and are finally in playoff contention, like you mentioned? Is this something that the Sens should be concerned about with how clutch Brady's been for the club over their last 10?
Yeah, I would certainly be concerned about him potentially running out of gas before we make it to the postseason. Uh, he has been incredibly clutch last few games. He scored a few winning goals. He scored some important goals. And so I think it's very obvious that the coaching staff wants him to be in the lineup for every game. And I completely understand that. I think we're at what game are we at right now? 69 games played, is that right?
Nice.
Yeah.
Obligatory. Um, I think once we get to game like 75, if the Sens are still, you know, firmly in a playoff position, even if we haven't mathematically clinched yet, I would consider resting him if it's something that is bothering him. I don't think that it's worth icing him for every game if we don't need to at this point. He's played a lot of hockey. He played in the Four Nations. He played, um, in just about every Sens game this season. I would like to see him get a bit of a break if they can give it to him. Um, it seems like something that he can play through, and I mean, maybe the argument is that if you give him too much time, it'll maybe start to bother him more. I, Maybe there's someone who knows more about sports physio would be able to weigh in on that because I am not that guy. But yeah, I think that he's been great the last like couple weeks, and if they have any opportunity to give him a rest, they should take it.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. Matt, you have similar thoughts on that then?
Yeah, I would really say if you lock in a playoff spot, um, as soon as you do that, sit him.
Yeah.
Like it's not hard to do that, and quite frankly, like it's clearly ailing him. And I would sit just about everybody um that needs to be sat for a bit, and maybe then play them in the last game so they're back to game speed and have played a game um, to get ready for said impending possible way to break a streak. Um, but I completely agree. There's clearly something bothering him, and I don't know if it's a give him a night off type fix. But if you can give him several nights off by going on a bit of a stretch here, that would be huge. So I'm fully in agreement because I think like he's the train conductor here. He's the guy that's chugging us along to the playoffs, or potential playoffs. And you just you gotta give him some rest when you can because you need him as close to 100% as possible.
And it is possible that he'll be getting some rest because the Sens did recall Stephen Halliday. Now they only have one spot that like enough money for one player to be recalled right now.
Yeah.
So I mean, it could be that Brady sits against Buffalo and they play Halliday and see what they have against a team that they have a reasonable chance of beating without Brady Tkachuk in the lineup. Hopefully. So that could be it. I guess we'll see. But before we get to our next topic, I want to remind everyone that we're on all the different social media apps. Most recently on Blue Sky, same as all our other platforms at Senstennial. You can find us there. We basically are as active on game days there as we are on X. So feel free to follow us on Blue Sky. And yeah, thank you for tuning in to today's episode. So, last but certainly not least, we want to get to playoff odds, and we're taking them from MoneyPuck because different, whatever you call them, models. My brain wasn't functioning. Different models have different percentages, but we're going to go with MoneyPuck. They have Ottawa at a 94.7% chance of making the playoffs. If you told me that that was Ottawa's chance at making the playoffs when you're nearing the end of March back in October, I would have been jumping up and down like, yes, please. Like, Yes. No other words. So hopefully, with about what 12 games left in the season, something like that. Nearing the
13 technically, but yeah.
13, yeah, 13 games left in the season. Hopefully, the Senators can continue to have that bit of a buffer between themselves and Wildcard 2. And hopefully, we can see the end of the drought. So I'll flip it to Bennett first. And how have you felt, Bennett, going into late March with the Sens being firmly in Wildcard 1?
Um, but let me tell you, my ass has never been this clenched before, at least not during the regular season. Um, it feels like we are on the precipice of being a real team again. But that 94% can easily become 90, become 85, become 80 if the Sens hit another 6 game skid, which they have hit a couple times this season. And so I think now would be a really important time for the team to kind of like break out of that boom bust cycle they've been showing all season long. And even if they don't have to go on like a 13 game winning streak, but if they can just, avoid any major dips, we're good, right? Like, you know, no stretches without, sorry, trying to avoid losing more than like 2 or 3 games in a row, and they're there. Mathematically, we're pretty secure. But it's just a question of, every win causes that percentage meter to tick up a little bit more, and every loss brings it down. So it's looking pretty good right now. We have a bit of a cushion, but this is a team that I think has struggled with complacency in past years, and we've talked about it at a micro level and closing out games and showing some improvement in that regard. Well, now it's time to close out the season. And, that's taking it on a macro level, and it's treating every game like it's game one of a series and going into it with that mentality. And I think I've heard Brady and other guys on the team talk about that. So I think that is the message that's coming from coaching staff, which is good. But just it can all turn to ash very easily. And I think I'm not going to feel comfortable until the end of the season, and I see that little X beside the team's name.
Yeah, I can appreciate that take for sure. I'm certainly optimistic, but trying to hold my breath and just wait and see, maybe in a few more games, how the standings are looking before I truly get excited. But Matt, I'll flip it over to you. And how have you felt about Ottawa's increasing odds here down the stretch to make the playoffs?
I love it. I love it. I can't say that enough. I don't know if you guys have been looking at the Senators subreddit, but there's somebody on there named Canada Ref who has been exceptional with posting magic numbers.
Yeah.
And
I'm gonna level with you. I have no idea what they mean. Every time they explain how the numbers work, I'm like, I don't get it. How does this one number represent both things? You'll have
well,
to you'll have
let
to
me
explain it to me.
let me cook here. So, um, essentially, the way the magic numbers today are, 3.5 for Philadelphia, 5 for Buffalo, 5.5 for Boston, Pittsburgh, 9 for New York, Detroit, 9.5 for Columbus, 10.5 for the Islanders, and 11.5 for Montreal, which is in the wild card. So the way they explain it is if we go 7-6, okay, it would eliminate the bottom 4 teams. So that's Philly, Buffalo, Boston, Pittsburgh, New York, Detroit. And Detroit can't lose 2 or more games.
Right.
So if they lose 2 games and we maintained at 7-6, they're done. Essentially, like as it stands right now, we have 79 points.
Right.
I think right now the projected playoff cutoff is like 90 some odd points. If we win 5.5 games, that's almost a guaranteed playoff spot. If we win 7 games, it's pretty well a slam dunk. And you want to keep seeing those numbers go down as well, because the 11.5 is, if we win 8 and Montreal loses 4, like, then our playoff position is locked up.
Right.
So us having games in hand on a lot of these teams is also very beneficial. But as it stands right now, we are 2 wins up on the next closest opponent. You want to, hope that the out of town scoreboard is working. And right now it's currently 2-1 Islanders versus Columbus, and you basically don't want that to go to overtime. And
Right.
Detroit is playing Utah tonight, and I think what's interesting about that game is Utah's also in a dogfight in the West, and they are going to be just as hungry. But Detroit it's not looking great for them because they are 9 points behind us. And you want Columbus to beat the Islanders, because that just means they become tied, and New York doesn't vault into a playoff spot over Montreal. So it's just as but at the end of the day, we're just in control of our own destiny. We just need to be above 500 the rest of the way, and we're good. I think if we have a very similar record as we did in March, we're looking handsome. So it's very anxiety inducing. I wish they had a couple more points up on some people, but we are, as of right now, the only one wildcard team or in the wildcard race that has a positive goal differential.
Right.
And that's a great determiner of who's making the playoffs and who's not. So we just need the Sens to keep doing what they're doing, because that's how you win games. And the next game is against the Sabres, who, yes, they just beat Winnipeg, but the Sens are going on a dad trip. And dad trips, and because they didn't have a mom's trip either. So I'm wondering if they're leaving it to the end of the season so the guys have the highest vibes.
I hope so.
That's all I can hope for.
Cool. Well, on that note, thank you everybody for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Hoping that the Sens can come through in the clutch and end that drought. It's been too long. Too long. So go Sens go, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Go Sens go.
Go Sens motherfucking go.